I parked in the gravel driveway of my parents' 50-year-old family estate in upstate New York, feeling my heart pound as I recalled the call from my lawyer earlier that morning. She had sounded tense and hurried. I had expected to walk in and greet my parents with open arms. Instead, I discovered that everything I thought was mine was already signed away. I stepped through the massive oak front door into a grand foyer that smelled of polished wood and faded memories. My father stood by the towering staircase, his posture rigid and his face unreadable. My mother leaned against a marble column, her arms crossed tightly as though she had been waiting for this confrontation for weeks. I swallowed and forced myself to meet their cold gazes. I spoke with a trembling voice. I had arranged to meet them with news that would affect the estate and their future, but I never expected it to be theirs entirely. My lawyer had notified them that I intended to contest the will, though the original paperwork had mysteriously disappeared. They exchanged a glance, and my mother let out a low chuckle that sent a chill down my spine. I clenched my fists at my sides and took a careful step forward. My father cleared his throat in a way that reminded me of business negotiations he had conducted with distant relatives decades ago. The silence lingered for an uncomfortable moment before my mother spoke. In a voice so soft and venomous I hardly recognized it, she said that the document had been signed the night before and that my therapist, Dr. Emily Hayes, was now the sole beneficiary. Remember the world tilting underneath me as those words settled in the air. My therapist, the one who had sat with me through long nights of tears and whispered fears, held the key to everything I had left in this world. Emotions roared inside me. Betrayal, confusion, grief, and anger all collided in my chest. At that moment I realized that I was trapped in a story I no longer controlled. In that lavish room with vaulted ceilings and golden chandeliers, I felt smaller than I had ever been. My father took a step forward and pressed a folded envelope into my hand. His gaze was cold but flickered with something that resembled regret. He told me that the choice was final unless I wished to pursue a costly and ruinous legal battle. He spoke as though I would welcome that idea. I looked down at the envelope and saw my name scrawled in my mother's elegant handwriting. The paper felt thick and foreign, like it belonged to someone else. It might contain pages of demands or a summary of debts I did not understand. I felt my vision blur with tears and smelled the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air like a mocking farewell. I looked back up at my parents, searching their faces for any hint of mercy or panic, but all I saw was certainty, the certainty that they had chosen a new path at my expense. I wanted to scream, to demand answers about how Dr. Hayes had obtained the signatures or who had witnessed the documents in the dead of night, but the words caught in my throat. Silence stretched between us like an accusation. I folded my arms and stepped back toward the marble staircase. Light from tall stained glass windows cast rainbow patterns on the cool floor. It felt surreal, like a dream I could not wake from. My mother smiled softly and said that Dr. Hayes had been a trusted family friend for years, that her involvement offered stability and a guarantee that the estate would be cared for. My father nodded in agreement and added that contesting the will would ruin our family reputation and destroy any chance I had at inheriting anything else in life. His words sank into me like stones, dragging me deeper into fear, the fear of losing everything and everyone I loved, including my therapist, the one person who had saved me from my darkest moments. I realized then that I stood at a crossroads between loyalty to my past and the uncertain future that Dr. Hayes represented. The thought of betraying the woman who had guided me through therapy made my stomach twist, yet the idea of watching the estate slip away into her hands felt like betrayal against my family. I took a deep breath and asked how they had convinced her to accept the responsibility so quickly. My father looked at my mother as though seeking approval, and she nodded. Before answering, she said that Dr. Hayes had approached them with a proposal during one of her visits to the mansion to check on my progress. They had thought it generous and felt it relieved them of the burden of dealing with my erratic behavior. She claimed she could manage the estate and ensure I continued my therapy uninterrupted. Their words filled me with conflicting emotions. I felt grateful for the care Dr. Hayes had shown me, yet furious at their condescension. I realized I had been treated like a child. My voice trembled as I said that I would need time to consider their proposal, and left the mansion with the envelope clenched tightly in my hand. Reluctantly, I drove away from the mansion in a daze, the envelope heavy in my lap as though it contained every secret I had ever kept. The late afternoon sun glanced off the windshield, and I squinted through the glare, my thoughts twisting like the country road I followed. Every mile felt like a promise of relief, as if distance might loosen the tight knot of dread coiled inside me. But instead of calm, I felt emptier, like a hollow shell filled only with questions. What exactly did my parents intend? Had they really believed Dr. Hayes would protect me, or had they used her name to cloak a darker plan? My hands trembled on the steering wheel, and I nearly veered off the road when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I pulled over, my heart hammering. The message read, "I know what's inside that envelope. Meet me at the old diner in Maplewood in 30 minutes. Signed, a friend." The idea of a friend seemed almost laughable. I hadn't had any close friends since I started therapy with Dr. Hayes 3 years ago. But the text stirred something in me, a spark of defiance. Maybe I wasn't as alone as my parents believed. I replied with a single word. "Who?" Seconds later, the phone went silent. I drove the remaining miles in tense silence, my thoughts racing through possibilities. Who would know about the envelope? How many people had access to my family's secrets? The diner's neon sign blinked pale green as I pulled into the dusty parking lot. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and grease, and a few locals nursed their mugs at the counter. I slid into a booth near the back, clutching the envelope against my chest like a shield. A tall figure emerged from the shadows near the entrance, someone slender, wearing a faded leather jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. Their stride was confident but cautious, and when they reached my booth, they paused as if weighing their next move. I studied them, trying to read any hint of recognition. Finally, they slid into the seat opposite me and pushed a manila folder across the table. "You didn't think you'd be the only one blindsided," they said, voice low and urgent. I lifted the envelope, then glanced at the folder. Inside were copies of documents bearing my signature, pages I didn't remember signing along, with transaction records showing large sums moving from the estate's accounts into an offshore trust under Dr. Hayes's name. My breath caught in my throat. I looked up at the stranger. "How did you get these?" I whispered. They leaned in, their voice barely audible over the hum of the diner's jukebox. "I work for your father," they said. "I'm his personal assistant. I've managed the estate finances for years, but something changed last week. I saw the paperwork come through, documents signed late at night, all pointing to Hayes. Then I got a call from someone claiming to be you, asking if I could help you find the truth. I don't know who that was, but it got me thinking. I pulled these records before they were hidden in the vault. My mind reeled. My father's assistant, someone so close all this time, secretly working against him. "Why help me?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. They looked away for a moment, then met my gaze. "Because I've grown tired of your parents' games. They treat everyone like pawns. And because I believe you deserve to know what they're planning." A cold knot of fear twisted in my gut. If my father discovered the assistant had leaked documents, they'd pay dearly. Yet if I refused this help, I'd walk blindly into a trap set by my own family. I weighed my options, heart pounding. Finally, I nodded. "Okay," I said quietly. "Tell me everything you know." They took a deep breath and began detailing how, the night before, my parents had hosted Dr. Hayes at the mansion under the guise of a celebratory dinner. They'd slipped into a hidden study to finalize the will, with 2 notaries present, one of whom had been bribed by my father's assistant months ago. They revealed that my parents feared my instability, citing my recent hospitalization after a panic episode, and believed giving everything to the therapist would secure control over my actions and keep the estate stable. My laughter caught in my throat. It was a cruel strategy disguised as concern. As they spoke, waves of anger and betrayal washed over me. The thought that my parents had manipulated my mental health, weaponizing it to strip me of my inheritance, burned me from the inside out. "They use my history against me," I said, voice cracking. "They think I can't fight back because I'm fragile." The assistant's expression softened. "You're anything but fragile. You're the only rightful heir. These papers can be challenged in court. You have grounds for fraud, undue influence, and coercion. But you'll need evidence, witnesses, and a team that won't be bought off. I pressed my hand against the envelope, feeling the weight of my future in its folds. I need to find Dr. Hayes, I said. If she's complicit, she could testify. But if she's been set up herself, the assistant nodded. Exactly. We need to know where she stands. I can get you her schedule. She'll be at the clinic tomorrow morning for a consultation. You can confront her then. I stared at the assistant, the world suddenly sharper, filled with purpose and dread in equal measure. I'm not sure I can face her, I confessed. She's been my lifeline these past years. The assistant leaned forward, voice firm. Exactly why you have to. You deserve the truth, even if it shatters everything you believe. And you need to decide. Are you going to let your parents dictate your life, or are you finally going to stand up for yourself? Their question echoed in my mind as I slipped the assistant's folder into my bag and tucked the envelope against my side. I paid my bill and left the diner, the night air cool against my flushed cheeks. I drove home with the headlights of passing cars blurring into ribbons of light, each one reminding me that time was slipping away. Tomorrow morning I would face Dr. Hayes, and everything would change. For the first time since I'd learned of my parents' betrayal, I felt something like clarity. I was no longer just a pawn. I was ready to play my own hand. The next morning I woke before dawn, my mind still racing from the secrets I'd uncovered at the diner. I dressed quickly in jeans and a simple black sweater, my stomach twisting with dread and determination. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, seeing a stranger with bloodshot eyes and a clenched jaw, someone who had been dragged into a battle for their own life. I grabbed the manila folder and the sealed envelope from the kitchen table where I'd left them overnight, sliding them both into my satchel. The early light filtered through the curtains as I stepped outside, the air crisp against my skin. In my car, I drove to the mental health clinic where Dr. Emily Hayes worked, following the assistant's directions that led me through quiet suburban streets. Each stoplight tightened the knot in my chest, but with every block I drove, my resolve strengthened. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful, and whether she stood as friend or foe. I arrived at the clinic just before 8 o'clock. The building's glass doors reflected my tense expression as I entered, and the receptionist greeted me with a polite nod. I asked if Dr. Hayes was available, and she hesitated before picking up the phone. A moment later she looked up, her eyes widening when she recognized me. "Mr. Dawson," she said, voice carefully neutral. "Please wait in her office." I followed a nurse down a silent hallway and into a sunlit room lined with books. Dr. Hayes stood at the window, hands folded in front of her. Her calm composure cracked when she saw the folder in my hand. "You're here because of your parents," I said without preamble. My voice shook despite my efforts to stay steady. "They signed everything over to you. I need to know why." She inhaled deeply, turning to face me fully. "I assumed you'd heard," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to betray your trust, but I had to hear their side before I spoke to you." I placed the envelope and folder on her desk. "These documents prove you're their new beneficiary. They think giving you control will protect the estate and control me." My eyes searched hers. "Were you in on it?" Her shoulders slumped, and she sank into the chair behind her desk. "No," she said quietly. "When they approached me, I believed they were making a plan to secure your care. They said they feared for your safety after your panic attack. They asked if I would agree to take responsibility for the property to ensure your treatment continued uninterrupted. I never saw the will until yesterday." She opened the folder, examining the copies of financial transactions. "These aren't mine. I never asked for money. I thought I was agreeing to guardianship for your mental health, not a full transfer of assets." Her voice cracked with emotion as she added, "I would never steal from you." My chest tightened, as relief mingled with fresh anger. "They used my history against me. They manipulated both of us." I watched tears glisten in her eyes as she closed the folder. "I'm so sorry. I cared for you, and I wanted to protect you from their pressure. But I should have verified the paperwork. I trusted them." I exhaled shakily and sat down across from her. "Will you help me set this right?" She nodded, reaching for her phone. "I'll testify. I want to help you challenge the will. We'll need affidavits from the notaries and an expert on undue influence. I have notes from our therapy sessions that demonstrate your clarity and capacity. That can show you're consent was compromised. My heart pounded with hope as she outlined a plan to gather evidence and secure legal representation. At that moment, I felt the tide turning in my favor. Over the next week, we worked in secret, building a case against my parents' ploy. Dr. Hayes recruited a lawyer who specialized in estate disputes. My father's assistant provided sworn statements and access to the hidden study where the will had been signed. We uncovered emails and messages showing how my parents bribed the notary and coordinated with a second witness. Each piece of evidence filled me with renewed strength. I reread therapy notes that spoke of my reasonable demeanor and sound judgment. I realized that I'd been unfairly labeled unstable, my own family conspiring to strip me of my heritage. Yet every document collected felt like a step toward reclaiming my life. Late nights were spent reviewing depositions and drafting motions. When I read the final draft of the complaint, tears streamed down my cheeks, not of sorrow, but of vindication. I was no longer their pawn. I was prepared to confront them in court. The day of the hearing arrived in a courtroom filled with spectators, some there for the estate dispute, others out of curiosity at the local scandal. My parents sat on one side, their faces composed, but their eyes betraying unease. I stood beside Dr. Hayes and our lawyer, clutching the file of evidence. When the judge called the case, my heart hammered, but I felt solid in my conviction. Our lawyer presented the evidence of undue influence, coercion, and forged consent. Dr. Hayes testified, her calm voice detailing sessions where I exhibited full comprehension and autonomy. She described the moment she realized my parents had deceived her, and why she believed in my capacity to make decisions. The courtroom hung on every word. When my father tried to deny the allegations, the assistant's sworn affidavit dismantled his defense. The judge reviewed the documents, then gave his verdict. The transfer was invalid, the estate belonged to me, and my parents were ordered to pay legal fees. As the gavel fell, relief washed through me like warm sunlight. I watched my parents' shoulders slump as the weight of their actions registered. I felt no triumph in their defeat, only a sober understanding of how far they'd gone to control me. Dr. Hayes gently squeezed my hand as we left the courtroom. Outside, the sky was bright, the air full of possibility. I inhaled deeply, tasting freedom for the first time in months. In the weeks that followed, I reclaimed the estate, overseeing renovations and hosting a small gathering to restore its legacy. My relationship with my parents remained strained. Trust would take years to rebuild, if ever. But I felt stronger, more grounded in my own worth. Dr. Hayes continued as my therapist, now bound by a deeper understanding of our professional and personal boundaries. The envelope that had once symbolized betrayal lay untouched in my safe, a reminder of the battle I'd fought and won. Standing on the mansion's balcony one evening, I watched the sun set over the rolling hills, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. I had faced the darkest parts of my past and emerged whole. The estate was mine, but more importantly, my life was once again my own.